All right, welcome to batch 2 for the Meris pedals. This has actually been a really highly anticipated release for me because I've been sitting on, at least on the reverb front, I've been sitting on these for probably like 3-4 months or something now, maybe not 4 months. I forget exactly how much time has passed since releasing batch 1, which batch 1 has been awesome. It's carried me through so many different songs, so many different sets, but batch 2 is particularly notable, especially on the reverb front, because there was a couple of discoveries in getting weird with things like just like the routing, the signal path, and putting effects in different places. But there's a reverb that I've been stuck on that I've called Riz Haze. I forget exactly why I called it that. I think just because it was so good and it had all this charisma and blah, blah, blah. So anyways, there was such a wild discovery when making it that I've never heard, in the end, I've never heard a more harmonically rich reverb in my life, that it made the Big Sky sound wildly flat in comparison. One particular set I swapped over to the Big Sky MX and I was excited to try it out live, and when I did a swell, I was so underwhelmed at how much it did not deliver what I've come to love from Riz Haze that I was sad. I played the rest of the set sad. So also it's worth noting that I am using 2 tone X's for this recording. My son is sleeping in the room next to me, and I needed to do something quiet. So I'm actually using some upcoming brand new tone factor captures. So be on the lookout for that. Those will be releasing in a matter of like a month or so. But that's what I'm using. My JMI on the left, my Blankenship on the right through the Supro cab. But one notable thing to keep in mind is, and I'll probably mention this as we, mess with each one, is the mix is going to be different for everybody for different reasons. I'll mention that per preset, but never be afraid to mess with the mix. For one, I'm using an expression pedal with my reverb, meaning I'm controlling my mix from 0 to 100% at any given moment on any of these reverbs, which is awesome, but some of these are definitely, crafted and saved with the intent of like, I like the mix where I saved it. But once again, that's going to be different for each guitar based on its output pushing into the front end of this reverb, and I'll explain more as we go. But without further ado, let's dive into the first reverb, which is Ancient Ambient. Now, this is just going in alphabetical order, downward starting from 99 and trickling down. It was just the easiest way for me to do it in a non-intrusive way on my current presets on my pedal. So these aren't in any particular intentional order. Ancient Ambient actually came off of a different one of the Ambient presets, but it's a really cool one. So it has the volume swell, so your volume pedal can be wide open and you can just start picking and strumming and it will swell in for you. Nice. All right, so that sounds really cool. Obviously, it will only get supported further if you have a delay on, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn on the BBD Dotted from batch 2, and we'll see what that sounds like with a little delay support. So sick. What I did there was I turned on a first gain stage as well, just to kind of lift it a bit, and I swapped over to my pick, which you could kind of hear the brighter artifacts start to come through that particular reverb effect. All right, next is Anthem. Okay, Anthem requires a little context. It is a really consuming reverb with a ton of compression. Basically, it is Riz Haze. but it's compressed to Kingdom Come. So it is essentially just a really squeezed version of the same thing, which the original intent was, since it is a compressor link, if I remember correctly, it is compressing center information more. So meaning the more drive and boost and volume pushing into the front end of it, it actually starts to scoot out of the way. So it will start to push it out of the way and scream around your guitar. Well, that was the original intent. What wound up happening is on lower gain, it wound up being a really epic consuming ambient reverb as well, just with the Riz Haze character. And so I've really enjoyed it for a variety of those reasons. And one thing that's worth mentioning, one time on a set I was playing and I strummed something, and since there's so much compression on the reverb, the crowd started to cheer, and their cheers literally fed back through my guitar, came out into the PA, and started to create a sort of like harmonic choir effect through my guitar, which is just wild. Like, in no scenario do our guitars normally feed back because we are using in-ears and we're behind the PA, but their cheers literally fed back in my guitar and harmonically started becoming like a choir into my guitar. It's wild. So there's so much compression. It's really cool. So that's kind of what I mean. I didn't change the mix of the reverb at all. Through an amount of compression, as I turned up gain, it started to push it out of the way more and more. So at light amounts of gain, which was what I was doing there at the beginning, it was really consuming. And then the more gain, the more volume starts to push it out of the way. So depending, if you have like really low output pickups and you want to accomplish that, even at your highest gain stage, you may find that it still doesn't push it out of the way as much as mine did there. And if that's the case, you can literally just like drop the mix or something of that nature to try to accomplish the same thing. All right, so next is called Dream Smoke. This one is once again a play off of Riz Haze, and I changed some other artifacts on the like depth and size and different things like that, and realize that it can make a really long-tailed epic reverb. And so this is one that, you know, it is for more of an ambient intent, but I'm sure there could be a variety of ways to find use with it. All right, so Ancient Ambient comes from Fade Ambient, so a very similar effect. It has a volume swell ability in it. Ghost Trem uses Riz Haze, but throws on a tremolo that kind of is just after the reverb, so it catches it and it does this really awesome wide panning. And here is Riz Haze itself. Awesome reverb that just, I found out a couple of tricks that basically pulled out some incredible harmonics and just accentuates really anything in a really interesting way. And I kind of use it for everything. To me, it has become all the things that I loved about past cloud reverbs, but just not being so long-tailed. It's shorter, but yet I feel like it's accomplishing more than those really big long-tailed reverbs. I'm going to throw on a little more gain and do like a swell. So I feel like I could probably just go on and on showing different ways that I love to use it. But one thing to note with this one in particular, I feel like you really just want to find your sweet spot for mix. For me, I guess it's going to be saved at a certain point that worked for me at a certain amount of volume output, but that might not be the case for you. I feel like somewhere around here for, like a first gain stage. It's kind of perfect. And, it's at about 22% there. That's where I worked my expression pedal to get to that point. It's going to be different for everybody, but it's just something that it's like, it's supportive, it's out of the way, but there's still times where I'm going to just absolutely drench it with that. But that's just to give you an idea. All right. Riz Bloom is a play off of Riz Haze, but it used some modifiers to get a different result that wound up making it, not my favorite over Riz Haze, but a different form of favorite. It's even wider. Riz Haze has this actual quality of like almost, it kind of compounds in the mono information more, whereas Riz Bloom here, first of all, it's got that late decay, but it also, it just accentuates on the outside in the stereo field a bit more. And it's really complex. It's really cool to listen to. And it just has different artifacts. Like if I pick things out, it does not respond the same as Riz Haze. That's why I wanted to include it. And that's why I have a lot of these, play off of Riz Haze type effects, because each one is doing something interesting and slightly different enough to justify it being a separate preset, not feeling like I'm just making a whole bunch of versions of the same thing, basically. So just then I was working the expression pedal just kind of lightly up and down to kind of show how I would maybe actively mess with it while playing live and just drench it out in moments and then really kind of clean it up in other moments to just make it more subtle and sweet. Now, Riz Wide Cloud, here we are, another variation. This one in particular played specifically with one of the things that made Riz Haze what it is, using the sort of like signal path ability where you can place these effects. It was using the compressor and putting it in a different location, yielded, once again, a similar but different response from Riz Haze, where that mono information was different. And Riz Bloom, on the other hand, was using a modifier to move things around, whereas Riz Wide Cloud is actually doing more of like a repositioning, which causes its stereo width to be different. Short plate is a short plate. It's awesome. It's really supportive, and it makes some of the other batch 2 delays really stand out and just kind of have a place without being so consumed by big ambient verb. Vibe plate further takes the idea of that short plate and it starts to add some other extra effects, and I believe it also has a bit of a longer tail. Vibe short haul kind of takes a similar concept of what that plate was doing with the modulation and all of that, but just in more hall form. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit more like, there's a little bit more low end content. I mean, it's a hall, so. All right, warm hall is a longer-tailed hall that is just warmer. A lot of these reverbs, while really nice and accentuating the guitar in really cool ways, definitely lean a little bit more on the like mid and high-end focus and aren't as warm overall. So wanted to make sure I had something of that nature. I'm just going to turn the delay off for a sec so we can actually hear and enjoy it by itself. The really gnarly, subtle bend is so cool in the reverb. Warp Cathedra, that is a fun, weird one. So I just wanted something that was a little more out of the box. Like, I love a lot of these that have been accomplishing some strong, inspiring basics, but I was like, I need something weird, you know? So that's what this is. I'll turn some delay on now. I'm going to turn on an octave effect as well, actually. All right, so that is all the reverbs of batch 2. So once again, it's just accomplishing a lot of fun, solid basics with a couple of weird twists. And the big notable thing for me was obviously Riz Haze. And like I said, I sat with it for months and was so inspired by it. Still am. Still is one of my big go-tos. So I think that's kind of the highlight of the whole batch 2 here. All right, so jumping over to the LVX, starting from the top in alphabetical order, we start with 16th tape. There's a bunch of great ones in here. One thing that I want to say is just like a housekeeping thing. I made the gain on all of these as high as possible that made sense using the dynamic modifier, because a lot of these, whenever I'd gain or whenever I'd turn the mix up, it never felt like they got present enough initially that I was like, sometimes I wanted to be consumed by it, and it never felt like they got there. So I was able to use dynamics to gain them up. Sometimes they can almost be a little too much. Sometimes they build up too much and they themselves overdrive the amp faster than my guitar is actually driving the amp. So on those occasions, if that happens for you and you don't like it for a specific delay, you literally simply can turn the mix down, just using the mix knob. I think most of these are set at 50% mix, where it's, not messing with your dry out or anything like that. And it's just kind of like equal parts guitar to equal parts delay. And if you need less, you can just turn that mix knob down and save it. I've done that with plenty of these, especially the BBD Dotted. I love the way it sounds. Sometimes I like the way that it interacts with my guitar. Sometimes it sounds too loud. A lot of these, because of their compression, with more input into them, will move out of the way a little bit. And that was designed on purpose, because without it, like I mentioned, the gain, they just weren't quite loud enough. But whenever you started to turn on more drives and boost and your guitar got louder, the delay got even louder as well. And it just felt a little imbalanced. So it would like start to consume your guitar whenever you're at your big moments, and at your quiet moments, it wasn't present enough. So, what I did with the compression is essentially the reverse. It's more present on lower stuff, but it's not as present on big stuff. So it's not getting in the way and just like consuming the clarity of your guitar. So that's why that's important. And I gave it as much forward gain and level as possible, so you can just take the mix knob if you want less and literally just turn it down a smidge and save it. Like I mentioned, I did that with the BBD Dotted. Sometimes I want it more present, sometimes I want it a little more ducked, on my cleans, and then that's essentially how I gauge it. So 16th tape, this is without any reverb. Let's go ahead and turn on Riz Haze. All right, BBD 8 is just like a slightly different version from BBD Dotted. And also the whole focus of this pack really was me trying to get some analog-y, kind of warmer style delays that are definitely more low-end present than the digital delays of the first pack, which it wasn't intentional to focus on digital delays. They just felt good to me at that point. But yeah, wanted to go for something more analog-y warm, and this is the 8th version. So a little reverb along with that. All right, and then BBD Dotted. This has been my kind of go-to ever since I made it, kind of along with Riz Haze. I'm just really enjoying the variety of kind of like low-end presence and just kind of percussive qualities it has sitting around my guitar. I'll go ahead and turn off the reverb for a sec so you can hear it by itself. So BBD Dual was my best attempt at making what was essentially like two different delays running into each other. It's a real challenge, which is ultimately why I did get two LVXs. You can see the other one next to this one. But it definitely got close. It gave me the vibe of it where I wanted to get something that was giving me in the past what was my polymoon ping pong left and right, along with like just a good dotted eighth. And rhythmically, I feel like it's giving me some of the same things. But either way, it's a really fun delay. I'll turn on Vibe Short Haul with it. So similar to the other one, I wanted to try to accomplish that like kind of multiple delay thing. But while I was at it, I was like, let's throw a couple of extra goodies on this, and found like a really cool feedback loop octave experience going on. I'll just strum something without reverb, and then I'll turn some reverb on. All right, here's Riz Haze with it. So for the most part, it's accomplishing that same rhythmic element, but it's got this really subtle octave thing on the back end of it, which, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could go in and increase the mix on that. But I'm a big fan of subtlety, especially whenever it's in the feedback loop. So it's continuing to exaggerate as more feedback goes on. And so it's just cool. It adds this like really odd head tilting artifact on the tail end of the rhythm, which is really cool. All right, BBD Poly, what would this pack be if it didn't also have a polymoon ping pong style, but just in BBD color? Here is Riz Bloom with it. So BBD Slow Pattern is a strange one in that it is actually just a standard delay with a different signature on the left than the right. But whenever you crossfeed it, it changes the pattern. All right, let's turn on Vibe Short Haul with it. With this one in particular, I love the way that it trails on. I think this one really accomplished and encompassed the like warm analog decay that I was really going for. So really love this one. All right, so Cine Oct is weird, standing for like a cinema, like epic octave thing. It's weird, and you'll see why. So essentially that's what it sounds like. It is what is my attempt at recreating what I was able to do in the Polymoon. They pretty much gave us that ability to do that same thing, but it changed a little bit of the response, but I can still get the same thing to happen. So here's with no reverb. I'm going to add a little bit more drive. Let's turn on like the constant or something. And then I'm going to drench it in reverb. So yeah, pretty gnarly, pretty cinematic, very cool. So Gallop Chorus is a weird one. It's another pattern of sorts, but it has this really cool, gentle chorus effect on it as well. It's rhythmic. It kind of moves with your guitar, but that subtle chorus just adds this really nice, I don't know, chorusy movement to it. And yeah, so here it is. That weird like was my ring catching the string, not an extra effect. All right, Krinkle 8th is a cool one. It's kind of like 16th tape, but this came from something that I just had in my mind that I went for trying to make, and it turned out really great. Then we'll throw on something like Riz Haze for that. Those were specifically parts for a song that I actually used those for, and yeah, they turned out really cool. The way that the sort of tapey, crinkly delay goes into Riz Haze, which is already accentuating harmonics in a really interesting way. You get that just really fascinating howl with the way it decays. Super cool. All right, and Poly Dual Mod was actually an attempt to recreate the line that I played on Beauty from Come Up Here, which was mostly influenced by the Polymoon, and it was this kind of chorusy ping pong delay, essentially, and that's what this is. I'll just go ahead and add Riz Haze to that to give it a little atmosphere. I wouldn't say it's exactly one-to-one to that exact effect from the Polymoon. The Polymoon was a little different, but for the most part, it accomplishes the same experience. So yeah, I was like kind of chasing that the other day, and for the most part found it. All right, so that is everything from batch 2 for the Meris MERCURY X and LVX. And if you're actually still sticking around, it is worth noting that the LVX is able to do modulation on quite an interesting scale. All the modifiers that are in there can actually be put on your dry guitar. So I have plans to create essentially a modulation pack for this, which is in process. And, you know, a lot of effects are done at the moment, but some still need some polishing. And I'll probably aim to do something where, you know, because not many folks are going to have two LVXs, so it's not practical to have, you know, just a pack that has no delay and is just modulation. So I'll probably have an A and B side where A is all of it with no delay on, and then the B side is like just like a good general dotted eighth delay that has all of the modulation effects on the way they were kind of built and intended. So anyways, that's what there is to look forward to, but that is batch 2 from Meris, MERCURY X, and LVX. Awesome pedals. Yet again, they are such a primary source of inspiration. I love them so much. They are complex, but when you take the time to find out what you want, they fully deliver and are absolutely the most inspiring thing I've played on. So that's batch 2.